The other aspect of my identity that's really big is my disability. My disability started when I was young. I've been disabled my whole life. My first disability that I found out about was being hard of hearing. When I was a toddler, my parents found out that I didn't have the full hearing. I had a hearing disability. And so I was fitted with hearing aids. I was given special education for my first year of school, and then I was mainstream, which means I was in the same classroom and in the general population, but I still received some services. I received speech therapy for a very long time growing up. And I adjusted very well to being hard of hearing. It wasn't a big deal for me. But when I was 17, I found out that I also had a vision disability. And they actually go together. We just didn't know why.
Welcome to Latinx in Power, a podcast hosted by Thaisa Fernandes.
Welcome to Latinx in Power. Today we are talking with Catarina Rivera. Catarina is a public speaker and DI, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant with over 14 years of experience in the public sector. She's the founder of Blindish Latina, a platform smashing disability stigmas through storytelling and advocacy. Welcome, Catarina.
Thank you so much for having me, Thaisa. It's wonderful to be here.
Amazing. I'm so excited with this conversation. In this episode, we'll talk more about disability awareness, inclusion, digital inclusion, accessibility, allyship, and advocacy. Very, very important topics. So I'm very excited with this conversation. So, Catarina, what does it mean to be a Latina for you?
For me, I'm Cuban and Puerto Rican, and being Latina means a lot to me. It's a really important part of who I am and my identity. Growing up, I was able to go to Cuba with my mom when I was 18 years old. That was the first time. And now I've been to Cuba 3 times. And I've been to Puerto Rico, I think, about 4 times. It's something that is part of my heritage. On my mother's side, I do have a great grandmother and great grandfather that are from the Basque Country in Spain. And I've also been able to go there and meet relatives in the Basque Country, which is a totally different culture as well. And just being Latina, I think, really made me aware of diversity and the power of diversity. When I was growing up, my parents taught me Spanish as my first language, even though I was born in the United States. And it's not really as common to see that with someone of my generation, where both of them have graduate degrees, they're English dominant. So that was a very conscious decision from them on their part. But I remember crying when I was going to school because I didn't know English. It was scary for me, I guess, going to a place where I didn't know the language. But I learned English very quickly. It wasn't really a problem. The problem for my mother was when I started to forget my Spanish. I was in elementary school and she saw I wasn't as strong in Spanish anymore. She said, nope, this will not stand. She put my brother and me into a school that ran on Saturdays. It was a Spanish school. And so I hated it. For 5 years, I went to school 6 days a week. We were doing homework on Friday nights for Spanish school. But I give her all the credit now. I thank her so much because that's where I learned to really read and write Spanish. And I learned history. It was much more in-depth than what I learned when I was very young. And that was a foundation for me. I've been able to use Spanish in my career just to communicate, just to be able to communicate when I travel and meet other people from different cultures. So I appreciate the language. And I think that just being able to know family from different places helped me to understand how big the world is and how the U.S. is not the center, it's not the best at everything, that we need to be humble and understand the diversity of culture and how important it is to appreciate, to respect as well. I think that's influenced me a lot. I also recognize that I have a lot of privilege. There's a lot of colorism in our community, and I'm a light-skinned Latina. So I don't have the same challenges as those who have darker skin. It's very real. Another thing that I recognized when I was younger was my economic privilege. my parents both being able to get well-paying jobs, or my mom had her own business that was successful. And there are other Latinos in the country that were more working class that had more challenges maybe in their communities with the violence and things that were going on in their schools. So when I recognized those differences, it really motivated me to do something with my privilege. And that influenced a part of my career. I was a bilingual teacher in the Bronx, and I felt like I was giving back to my community in that way. And later on, I did food justice and community organizing work. I also felt that I was giving back to the Latinx community. So it's very important for me. I just love our culture. It's fun. We have great food. I love to dance salsa. I love to dance bachata, merengue. And I just think that we have a beautiful richness to our culture. And even, we come from different countries. It's not the same. Of course, in every country, there's this connection that I can find that you can connect with when you meet people, even though the food might be a little different or the dancing is a little different. I love learning all the dances.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I totally agree with you. The connection is something that is always present between us. And I love your mom already. I'm sure it was hard to study in a Saturday, but that's incredible. That's incredible. I feel that it's very interesting how we get to know more about the culture through the language. So it's very interesting. And I'm totally with you about forgetting the language. My first language is Portuguese. I speak Portuguese every day, but I'm feeling that I'm forgetting things. And I remember in the past, I always thought, how can you forget your native language? But it's real. It's real. We forget. I think I'm in a stage where I'm creating words. And sometimes people they talk to me this word doesn't exist. And how did everything start? Can you give us an overview about your life and your career?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Maryland, in the United States. And the other aspect of my identity that's really big is my disability. My disability started when I was young. I've been disabled my whole life. My first disability that I found out about was being hard of hearing. When I was a toddler, my parents found out that I didn't have the full hearing. I had a hearing disability. And so I was fitted with hearing aids. I was given special education for my first year of school, and then I was mainstream, which means I was in the same classroom and in the general population, but I still received some services. I received speech therapy for a very long time growing up. And I adjusted very well to being hard of hearing. It wasn't a big deal for me. But when I was 17, I found out that I also had a vision disability. And they actually go together. We just didn't know why it was hard of hearing. But it's part of a syndrome called Usher syndrome. And with my vision disability that I found out about when I was 17, it's progressive. It's basically a narrowing of the visual field where I have kind of tunnel vision. It's not exactly tunnel vision, but that's the easiest way for other people to understand it. That it's a very small window of vision that I have. And that's what I have now. But when I was younger, I had a little more. So I definitely experienced changes. So that was just something that's all along my life. I was going through my journey with my disability identity, along with, of course, figuring out who you are as a young person and what you want to do in the world. From a career standpoint, I started my career with Teach for America. Right after college, I decided to move to New York because I always wanted to be independent. And with my blindness, I knew I would eventually need to stop driving. So I decided to stop driving before someone else would tell me I needed to do that. And that's what moving to New York was, keeping myself independent, going on a great adventure. I had dreams of living in New York. It was so exciting to me. And so from my career, I was able to start as an educator and teaching bilingual education. I also earned a master's degree because you had to have a graduate degree to be a teacher in the New York City school system. So I had to work and during the day and go to school at night. And that was in dual language bilingual education. From my time in the classroom, I taught for 4 years. I really became passionate about nutrition and health because I saw that my kids were not eating healthy food. They had a lot of candy. And when I would go to the stores in the neighborhood, the quality was not great. And the selection, in terms of, there were a lot of packaged foods. There were a lot of unhealthy things. And I felt like I wanted to know more about what was going on and how I could help. How could I help these families? Because the families loved their kids. Now, there was a lot of love there, but I also was concerned about what those options were for them. So I started to learn about nutrition. I started to get into public health. I quit my job teaching to start a community health program in my community where I was living, which was Washington Heights and Inwood in Uptown Manhattan. It's the last two neighborhoods of Manhattan. That's where I lived my whole time in New York City. So after doing this program, which was really fun and exciting, and I met a lot of people, but after a while, I realized, okay, educating families is not going to change this. I need to learn more. And that's when I decided to go back to work full time. And I worked in the nonprofit sector after that. I worked in youth development, an after school program that had a health component. And I also got my master's in public health at night. So I was working during the day, going to school at night again. And so then I moved into a food bank after that. And I worked for a long time there, working on community engagement, community organizing in the beginning. And then I started to do some programs work where I was helping with some capacity building. Capacity building is really just training and providing resources to the food pantry leaders. So that was like my career journey. In terms of like working on my own businesses and what I do now, I started a travel company along the way, started it and then realized, building trips is really hard to make a sustainable business, like a small business. So I said, okay, I learned a lot though. We even did a trip to Brazil that we were going to launch. But then with COVID hit, we had to stop the travel operation. So I always loved entrepreneurship. I always had things going on the side and things that I was involved in outside of work. I was never just about my day job. And when I got very confident in my disability in 2020, I felt called to start an Instagram account and just put it out there with something I was thinking about. So I started Blindish Latina, and it was a place where I could share my stories. It was a place where I could raise awareness. I saw that my content was resonating with others. And that's something that I realized I could turn into a business because I do love public speaking. And that's how I started focusing on it. I created a brand around myself and started to give tips for companies because unfortunately, a lot of companies, they say they focus on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they're not really considering disability. They're very behind in bringing disability into that effort. So I know that there's a big need to improve there and just to make people aware, like how many people are disabled. At least 1 in 4 adults in the United States is disabled, at least. There's so many people that are kind of struggling in the workforce. They're not getting the support or they're just not feeling included. So that's something that I work on in my business to help companies with their disability inclusion journey so we can have better workplaces for everyone.
Incredible. I love your story and it's so inspiring to hear. And I love your curiosity going to different places, learning more, applying. And as you said, not just focus on your full-time job, but also your hobbies, the things you're interested in, always with this entrepreneurship mindset and also advocacy. And I want to go deeper into a lot of things you share with us. And one thing that I want to talk first, that I love how open you are talking about that. So you describe your disability progression as moving through the following 4 stages, from denial to acceptance to self-advocacy to public advocacy. And can you talk more about your process?
For sure. So first of all, I want to let people know that Usher syndrome is the most common cause of combined deafness and blindness worldwide. There's over 400,000 people worldwide that have Usher syndrome. I was diagnosed, as many people are, under the medical model. And what that means is that something that resides within the individual and that needs to be fixed, treated, cured by the medical community. The medical community has the answers. They're the experts. They're the ones that should be dealing with disability. Now, the negatives of the medical model there are many. I'm not in favor of this model, is that when I was diagnosed, for example, what they told me was, we can't tell you your progression. We can't tell you what's going to happen to you. There's no cure for your condition. And they just sent me and my parents out into the world with that. Now, knowing what I know now, I question, why didn't you talk about how to live as a blind person? What resources there are out there? How you can find community with people that are older than you, who know how to navigate systems, that know the tools that are out there. Why did they not mention any organization and some of the things that we can do to just take care of our eyes? So there were vitamins that we could take. There are things like wear sunglasses, and I have a different tint to my sunglasses than other people. So that is very challenging, I think, for a family to not get any real support on what it means to live life now. Because you're still going to live life. You're going to continue on. It's not like your life is over when you find out about a disability. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of negative ideas about blindness in particular. My mother was the one who found resources and was able to get support from a foundation that focuses on blindness. So from that time, when I was 17 years old to now, I grew a lot in my disability journey, because when I was 17, I was devastated. I felt a lot of grief. I didn't want to talk about my blindness. Every time I did talk about it, I would say, I'm going blind. And I would cry. And I was always saying that sentence, I'm going blind. I felt like I was in that phase of denial. And that's how I talk about it now. I remember at college, I had trouble seeing at night. That was something that I did experience already at that time. Sometimes I would be uncertain of where I was going. I was walking really slowly or checking a step. People would interpret that often as me being drunk. And I would rather them think that I was drunk than know that I was blind. And that was something that was very real for me at the time, wanting to hide my disability, wanting to blend in. And I did not drink in college because I was very concerned about my own safety, my own independence. I wanted to have all of my wits about me, all my faculties, but people thought I was drunk. After college, and I made that decision to move to New York and stay independent, I started to accept my disability more. I started to meet other blind people, because there's a lot of blind people that live in New York. I was able to attend some networking groups, attend some events. That was really helpful, just to see people that were older than me, that were thriving, that had their careers, that came with their white canes. And it was just something they used, that they were very confident. And that really helped me to accept more my disability. And I got some other resources and services that were helpful. But it wasn't ready for everything. It wasn't ready to be super public. I remember that as part of my services from New York State, I had a trainer that she came to my house and she helped me make sure that my house was safe. So she bought me some things. One day that she came, she brought a white cane. And she was like, I just want to have you use it outside. Let's start practicing. And I wasn't ready for that. I was not okay with it. We were going to go out into my neighborhood where I lived every day. And I was concerned about people all of a sudden seeing me with a white cane. And that was something that I was nervous about. I was upset about. So I refused. I remember that. Very strong refusal. And I felt like she had almost betrayed me in a way, because she didn't really give me that agency of asking, why did I want to do this or not? But a few years after that, I did decide on my own to start using a white cane, because it was very stressful commuting home from Midtown in the wintertime when it got dark very early. I had a new job in a different neighborhood with a lot more people in it. So I decided I'm not going to stress out anymore. I'm just going to start using a cane. I'm going to get over this. And now I've been using a cane for like 7 years. It's made my life a lot better. Once I started using the cane, there's no hiding anymore. I'm out there. I have my cane. People can immediately know that, hey, she's blind, something's going on. And that's when my self-advocacy voice got very strong, because I would use the cane as a conversation starter and be like, hey, I'm blind here, this is what I need, or I would ask for help when I needed it. I would talk to my fitness class instructors before the class and, explain to them how they could help me and what I needed. And I had better experiences everywhere, every time I used my voice. So I saw the power of my voice. That's what pushed me now into public advocacy, because my life got better because I used my voice. But I didn't want only my life to get better. I wanted to help other people. I wanted to do something greater on a bigger platform with my voice. Now that I have the capacity to do so, that I feel so confident in who I am, that includes my disability, that includes disability pride. It's been something so meaningful now to be able to be a public speaker, to engage in advocacy online, and to really let people know, like, disability, there's nothing wrong with disability. But some of the biggest problems we face are the inaccessibility in our world and the barriers around us that make it difficult. So I unfortunately have to do a lot of work to adapt to the world instead of the world adapting to me. And that's something I want us to change.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so late on that. Yeah, it needs to change. Thank you for sharing your story. So inspiring. And now you can inspire other people and help other people. How was your process creating Blindish Latina, a platform smashing disability stigmas through storytelling, advocacy, and education?
Growing up, I watched my mom have her own business that was very successful. She's my role model. I knew that I wanted to figure out how to be in control of my own time, to have time freedom and be my own boss. I also wanted a business that would allow me to work from anywhere. I didn't know exactly what that business was going to be, but that was my dream. In my entrepreneurial journey, I started different things. I started that nonprofit community health program. Then later on, I started the travel company. And I've learned from each of those projects. A lot of them were not designed to make money because they were community-minded ventures, but they still taught me a lot. I think what happened with me in my journey is that the pandemic made a big difference. The pandemic gave me a boost to not wait any longer to try getting things done. I had the idea for Blindish Latina for a while. I just hadn't started it. But I created Blindish Latina because I was going to host an event with another disabled Latina. Her name is Mariela Paulino. Her account is Project Hearing. And Mariela and I were going to collaborate, but I didn't have my account up yet. And I didn't want to share the information from my personal account. So that gave me the kick in the pants I needed. I created Blindish Latina. I shared the details of the event, and we started to collaborate on different virtual events in 2020, right, in quarantine. This was very exciting because I just connected to the community. I started to have the conversations I wanted to have. I felt very energized by it. And near the end of 2020, I got some advice from another disabled entrepreneur named Tiffany Yu. And Tiffany said, look, you're doing too much. You're trying to build a collaborative brand and your own brand. And you really need to establish your own brand first before going into a very deep collaboration. And she was absolutely right. I hadn't done enough to grow Blindish Latina, to really establish who I was and what I was doing, because I was doing this collaborative piece and Blindish Latina. So at the beginning of 2021, I set up a strategy for the year. I wanted to focus on Blindish Latina. I focused on building my authority online, on LinkedIn and Instagram, sharing tips for the workplace, really being intentional about talking about disability at work. That was my focus from January through May. And then I launched my business in May 2021. When I launched my business, I was able to announce I'm taking clients. That was basically the impetus for the launch, to say, hey, I'm here. Let's go. I learned a lot in the process from other public speakers. and DEI consultants that I connected with, because this was a new industry for me. I had not worked in DEI before. I had not done this type of corporate consulting. So it was very important to connect with other people. The other thing that I think my success really depended on was consistency. The fact that I decided to show up online and share regular posts, the consistency of showing up is what really builds a platform. In the beginning, I was posting 5 days a week on Instagram. And I was doing all my content. I remember I was batching on Sundays and creating a bunch of things. And then I would post every day. I had 2 reels go viral in the summer of 2021. One of them, more than 5 million views. And the second one, more than 2 million. And it happened very close to each other. That was super exciting. You can't plan for that. It just happened. It grew my account. So growing the platform has been very exciting and affirming. I know that my voice is reaching people. Now I continue to focus on both LinkedIn and Instagram and just continuing to show up. I don't have time to do as much social media because now I have so much client work, but I hired some team members who are supporting me. And so we're just growing, continuing to do new things. I was just interviewed on ABC News. It was my first TV interview. And these are things that I wrote down and dreamed about and said, oh, that would be so cool to be on TV. I was featured in Forbes. That was also something that seemed surreal and dreamlike to attain. But I just know that now that this business has become successful and I've seen the power of my intention and my consistency, there really are no limits.
Oh, incredible. Incredible. Congratulations for being on Forbes and ABC. That's amazing. We are going to link to the description of this episode more about Blindish Latina, so you can check that out. That's incredible. One thing that I also wanted to talk in this episode is some myths people might have about accessibility. So I would love to hear more from you. If there's anything you want to share. I think one thing that stuck with me that you just talked was the fact that when you're learning about your disability, the medical field, like the doctors, they're always talking about how to fix a disability, but not focusing the fact that how to live with it, what are the resources, what are the things you can do. So people don't talk much about that. So I love that you share more. So I was wondering if there's anything else you want to talk.
One myth about accessibility that I see is that unfortunately accessibility is often seen as something extra, something that is an add-on that you can do or not do. But what is beautiful about accessibility is that everyone benefits when you create it. When you invest in accessibility, everyone benefits, not just disabled people. People seem to think that accessibility only benefits a small group of people, and that's not true. So let's give a few examples. Curb cuts in the sidewalk, where the sidewalk at the corner slopes down and you can easily roll off of it. Curb cuts were originally designed for wheelchair users, but the general public is using them and benefiting from them. If you're pulling a suitcase, if you're pushing a stroller, if you are elderly and you're trying to be safe, curb cuts are definitely safer. Delivering a package, all of these people in the world are using them. And so that's just an example of how when you design for accessibility, a broader group benefits. Another example is closed caption. So I'm using closed captions right now. I use closed captions on every video call. When I watch TV, I use closed captions. But I have now understood that people with ADHD benefit from captions. It helps them to better understand information. People with auditory processing disorders, people who are English language learners, they can better understand. And then when you look at social media and caption videos, people sometimes just want to watch with the audio off, or they're somewhere they don't have their headphones, whatever it is, their general public prefers to watch caption content. And that is another example of how accessibility is not for a small group, it's for everyone. So then you have meeting agendas, and this is a workplace example. I talk about this in my TEDx talk because I really want people to know it's not necessarily complicated to be accessible. when you send out an agenda for a meeting ahead of time, as a hard of hearing person, now I know what you're going to talk about. That helps me better follow the meeting, especially if you're using a key term or something that I haven't heard before. I can read it on the paper. Now I've got it. Other people that benefit from meeting agendas are those who just need more time to process information. They're going to have an easier time getting ready for meeting and being able to contribute time ahead of time to look at the agenda. And so it really supports a broader group of people, just anyone who needs more processing time, anyone who's introverted and needs more time to think and prepare their thoughts. That's going to generate a better meeting overall.
Incredible. I love your examples, and I love how someone as IC individual contributor can foster a more accessible environment, like having a meeting agenda. I think sometimes people think that fostering an accessible work environment needs to come from management, but you as an IC individual contributor can also do, and there's a lot of things you can do, and you already share some examples. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. And Catarina, which resource helped you in your journey?
In terms of my journey, I felt that the documentary Crip Camp was amazing for me in terms of my journey. It is available on Netflix and also for free on YouTube. Crip Camp changed my life because it showed me the power of cross-disability connection. It is a documentary that featured different people who all had different kinds of disabilities really coming together and fighting for their rights. So after I watched this, I remember I joined Clubhouse right after, because this was in the pandemic. So Clubhouse was a great place to connect and meet people. And I met many disabled advocates and leaders there who I'm still in contact with today. It helped me feel more connected to the overall disability community beyond just my blindness or having Usher syndrome. So for you listening, I would really encourage you to learn from disabled voices and leaders that are already out there. Every platform that you're on, there are disabled voices that we're loud, we're proud, we're sharing educational content, funny content, all types of things. So follow some people. If you love reading, then you can read Demystifying Disability by Emily Ladau is a very great starting point. Or you can read Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. And of course, there's everything that you're looking for. You love podcasts. There are disabled-led podcasts. So one you can start with is The Human Perspective by Judy Human, and it's spelled like her last name. So those are some great resources to start with.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. I love this documentary. I love that you mentioned that. That's incredible. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. I definitely want people to learn. I also have a free ebook on my website that talks about best practices for accessibility. And I make it very, very simple, because that's something that I think with digital accessibility, people really don't understand how much you can do in a very simple way. So things like image descriptions, alt text, camel case hashtags. These are just things that not every non-disabled person is even aware of. So my ebook makes it really simple.
Incredible. Yeah, we are going to link your ebook as well. Thank you so much for sharing. We are getting to the end of this episode. I want to thank you again for your time, Catarina. I learned a lot. I'm feeling very inspired and very excited with this episode. And can you share more where people can find you? We are going to link to the description of the episode, all the links, everything you are talking about.
People can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on my website. You can sign up for my newsletter. So it's catarinarivera.com or catarinarivera.com.
Amazing. That was incredible. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.